Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Highland Park Plan and Design Commission for March 5th. Director Fontaine, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Henry.
Present.
Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Mantis.
Present.
Commissioner Bruckman. Commissioner Hecht.
Present.
Vice Chair, Chair for this evening, Kirsch.
Present.
And Chair Moore. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. I do recognize Annette Littler, City Council Liaison, Corporation Counsel Martinez, Student Rep Alex Mendoza, and Student Rep Jackson Roberts. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone in the audience here and the vast thousands that we're reaching through our internet feed, who I'm sure are rapidly attending tonight's meeting. We have three main items on the agenda tonight. All three are continuations of public hearings. But our first item of business is minutes from February 20th. So do I have a motion regarding approval of those minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries unanimously, so those minutes are approved. All right. Next item on the agenda is a continuation of public hearing PUD 2024-00001 for an amendment to a special use permit in the nature of a planned development for modifications to the off-street parking requirements and design review. That's for 555 Roger Williams Avenue. As I said, this hearing has been previously open, so Senior Planner Burhop, do you have an update for us this evening?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you. My name is Carl Burhop. I am a senior planner with the City of Highland Park, the Community Development Department Planning Division. Okay, so this is for a planned development. That's what PUD stands for, is for a planned development. This is an amendment for off-street parking modifications with design review. There we go. Okay, this is the location of the property. It's down in the Ravinia Business District on Roger Williams. This was considered on February 20th. The Plan and Design Commission did direct findings of fact recommending approval, but with a condition that it be limited to those non-residential permitted uses that are allowed in the B2RW as a permitted use, the letter P in those tables. Also, the Commission provided various comments and feedback, including accessibility from on-site parking spaces to the tenant spaces. And so I just have a few slides to go over the applicant's updated materials. The applicant did submit site and elevation plans. Those are in the packet. Those site and elevation plans proposed 4 new wall-mounted lights, exterior lights, 1 new pole-mounted light, as well as a striped pedestrian path from several parking spaces to the first floor tenant spaces, and also a sign. For lighting, these are 2 snips from the spec sheets. The one on the top is a sample representative of the exterior mounted light, and the one on the bottom right, I believe, is for the wall mounted lights. The applicant indicates that they will both be 3,000 Kelvin CCT. Well, yeah, I'll just go through this and then come to the end. They indicated and what they highlighted. So there were 2 submissions in the packet. There was the lighting specs that were unmarked up that were submitted last week and were included in the Friday posting. And then the applicant did highlight several specific specs in, it was the same spec sheets, but they highlighted several. and that was reposted in the packet today. And so the applicant did indicate in those highlight that the wall-mounted one will have the bug rating, which is a measurement for exterior lights, has the B1, which is backlit, the U0, which is the uplight, and then the G, which stands for glare for 2, and then the pole is the B2, U0, G2. Well, what does that really mean? Well, that relates to the standards. They're both below the maximum allowed. Those are the maximum allowed, though I will point out that the recommended is probably the B2, U0, G2, because that would be limited if it was a residential district. The foot candle photometric is to be provided. The applicant was not able to procure that. They will have to, in this point in time, they will have to verify they meet the foot candles at the property line, and the poles must be limited, the pole lighting must be limited to a maximum height of 16 feet. As for the finish, since this is a design review, the pole one is meant to be black finish and the wall one's meant to be a coastal dark smoke. That's what was indicated on the spec sheets. I will point out that the exterior lights, all of them, well, let me rephrase that. The three wall mounted are on the back of the building facing north. There is residential diagonal, but not across. The Ravinia Housing Association has homes that's diagonal and down. And same thing with the proposed pole mounting. So this is the building. And then the 3 lights are proposed on the back with 1 pole mounted light there. And there are no homes in this location. The only homes are these, the Ravinia Housing Association. Otherwise you have the park and the train track. And then there's 1 wall mounted light on the east facing the train track, and then the Metro Park or the parking lot across from that. Signage review. The applicant provided several examples. I would not consider these final. The ones in the right of way that would have to be approved by the city. That review is not completed, and so I do not know yet if the right of way sign will be accepted. However, I will point out that on this sign spec that the or sign plan, whatever you want, the sign plan that was in the packet, and this was posted today, it's 2 square feet, which meets the on-site requirement. It would just have to be lowered to a maximum of 4 feet in height. As long as that was located on their property, that would be allowed in the zoning code without a permit. They just have to comply with those dimensions. Parking review. So parking for the site, mostly consistent, but slightly updated from what we discussed 2 weeks ago. So again, 30 spaces on the site. And let me be very clear too, because so the site now, and for several years, the site is the building and then this parking lot behind. That was not the case when this was originally approved back in 2014, 2015. When that was the case, it was just the front. The back was owned by Ravinia Housing Association, though the applicant leased or used those spaces. Well, since then, the applicant has acquired that back space. So when I say the site, I'm referring to both the building and the parking lot behind.
Wait.
So there are 30 spaces required for residential use. There are 3 spaces that are dedicated for accessibility purposes. And there are 18 for the commercial floor space, first floor spaces. That's 51 spaces altogether. And then of course of those 18 commercial first floor spaces, 3 of those are dedicated by zoning code, by zoning approval and zoning code for the personal trainer land use that's already in there. Therefore, 15 spaces are available for the commercial use. One of the highest off-street parking requirements would be 15 spaces per 1,000 square feet GFA. We went over what GFA meant 2 weeks ago, and I have a slide if I need to go back to it, is for restaurant excluding dancing and entertainment, basically your standard dine-in restaurant. So the applicant could, right now, take 1,000 square feet and use that for a restaurant. So basically, right now, they could take 1,000 square feet for dining area, and then however many square feet they need that's exempted, like the kitchen, the bathroom, mechanical room, however much space that takes, and that could be occupied now. And so the first floor commercial area, when it was approved, it was approximately 5,400, 5,500 square feet. And the personal training space is about 900 square feet. So based on that, that's about 4,600 square feet. And so some 1,000 to 2,000 square feet, however the math shakes out on that, could be occupied now for a restaurant. Okay, so parking review. So again, the applicant did not request specific numeric relief. What they originally requested was that just that the parking spaces for the commercial use be deemed sufficient for any allowed use in the district. Of course, there was discussion 2 weeks ago about just deeming it sufficient for just those non-residential permitted uses for the B2RW. I'll let the applicant speak for themselves, but I believe they agreed with that. So right now, you have 18 spaces that are available for the first floor commercial, but 3 are used or dedicated. And so what would the maximum requirement be? I did provide this number 2 weeks ago, but I wish to tweak it based on additional review. So the max requirement based on that square footage number, and that was the original square footage number for the commercial space from the original approval. This would be for no deductions for GFA. So I want to remind the commission, this first number, like I said 2 weeks ago, is hypothetical that makes no deductions. In reality, there will be deductions. So the maximum, if they did your standard dine-in restaurant, which is a restaurant excluding dancing and entertainment, and they did that for the whole first floor, including the occupied commercial space. So just the most that could be would require 82 off-street parking spaces, but they have 18 available, so the relief would be 64. However, what is the current situation and what are some more realistic ballpark numbers? So the current available space is approximately 4,500 square feet. And again, these square footage numbers I'm throwing up, I want to call them approximate. The applicant should be given the opportunity to further inform what those numbers are based on what the personal trainer ended up occupying. So if you take a 33% deduction, again, the gross floor area lets you take deductions, kitchen area, mechanical spaces, bathrooms, and they'd require 46 off-street parking spaces, and the relief is all the way down now to 31. And if it's 50%, if you get to deduct 50%, well, then now the relief is down to 19 spaces. And I just provide this as way as context for, you know, what is approximately, hypothetically, the relief being requested, numeric. This slide just goes through the relief from when it was originally approved to now. If there are questions on this, I will take it. I only have one thing to say. I just want to make sure it's clear. And I hope that font is not too small, but this was in the report. I just want to be clear. The relief column here, it's not cumulative. It's overall approval by approval. So when it was originally done, this was the original relief. And then the overall relief has actually declined, well, until this request, obviously, but it has declined because when the applicant acquired the property behind the building, well, that decreased their relief for the project because now those parking spaces were on site. And then the overall relief for the site as a whole went up 1 space when they got 1 space relief for when the personal trainer went in. And then right now they're on this bottom amendment. And I just gave you hypotheticals for those numeric relief. Again, this is the applicant's proposed benefit, public benefit. This is required for that subsection. This is a specific type of relief that triggers the requirement for public benefit to be proposed. The applicant states the applicant will help fund the Ravinia TIF District Streetscape Improvement Plan within the Ravinia Commercial District in an amount of $5,000. The commission should note the requirement, the standard for review for this type of proposal. All proposed public benefits shall be commensurate with all zoning relief requested by the applicant. And sub B there too, proportional to the anticipated impact of the proposed plan development on adjacent properties and land uses and on the community at large. This is my final slide. So the commission should reopen the public hearing, take testimony, deliberate, and direct as appropriate. The commission is a recommendation body, city council. Oh, gosh darn it, same typo I had last. My apologies. Council should be capitalized. City council is the decision maker. There are findings of fact. FOF is findings of fact, recommending approval in the packet. There are 3 conditions. Of course, corporation council would legally wordsmith those for whatever final they needed to be in the ordinance. And of course, the commission, should please make it clear if those were captured correctly or if those need to be amended. The first one was my understanding of the motion from 2 weeks ago. The off-street parking relief is limited to non-residential permitted uses listed as that letter P in section 150.490 for the B2RW zoning district. Then the second one relates to just compliance with lighting. From a staff perspective, we spoke with the applicant, and I'll just make it clear for the record now. They just have to submit that before a permit or occupancy can be issued for the property, as long as they comply with the standards, as well as the condition of 3,000 Kelvin correlated color temperature. It's fine. If they don't, then that's back here. That's back here. For an amendment. And then same thing with the signage, just applicant to provide a code compliant sign. I mean, they have options in the code to provide signage. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners for staff? Starting with Commissioner Henry.
Thank you. Carl, you made a big point of 1,000 feet, a 1,000-foot restaurant, and the number of parking spaces that would be required. But the relief being requested is not just for that, it's for that entire first floor, isn't that, am I correct on that?
That is their request, yes. Their request is for the entire first floor.
Okay, so we're not talking about 1,000 feet, we're talking about 4,000 feet.
Well, right, the first...
Give or take, I understand that.
First floor, in the original approval, the first floor, I think it was 5,470 square feet of commercial space.
Okay, but they're asking for relief for all the space, not just 1,000 square feet for a restaurant.
That's correct.
But that was an illustration of what's done with the
No,
current
I
situation.
understand, but I just wanted the point to be made that we're not talking about relief for 1,000 square feet. We're talking about relief for 4,000, arguably, square feet.
If I could say one more thing, I do want to contextualize that because the first floor commercial space does have 18 parking spaces. So I guess, yes, they are asking relief for all the first floor, but again, they're not asking for all relief period for any commercial uses. They're only asking for that would be more than the 18 they're already providing. I would just add that.
Fair enough.
Commissioner Mantis? Commissioner Hecht?
This still would cover.
That's correct.
Okay, and let's see, what's on my list? So we have added in a design review element here with the lighting and the signage, is that correct?
The lighting, yes. The signage, I would say is not part of the design review, but it can be a condition of the approval because the signage, as long as they're able to do it compliant, they can just put the sign on the property.
So are we okay in including both the signage and the lighting review into the findings of fact? I'm going to ask the Corporation Council if that's all right.
To the extent that this is design review, of course, you have final decision-making powers. How I'm interpreting this, and Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the lighting is being encompassed into the amendment to the special use permit. And so it is sort of almost like, I don't want to call it a modification or a variation, but it is part and parcel of one relief. We're not taking them separately as we might usually do. Have a design review element and then like a planned use development application. This is all together. And again, please, Carl, let me know if I'm misinterpreting this in any way.
No, that's precisely.
So if an up and down vote on the findings of fact in front of us will clear the board of this, okay?
Right. Think of it as approval of the requested relief as proposed. The requested relief being all elements, the parking relief, the lighting plan, as well as the amendment to the development plan.
Jackson?
Yeah, Carl, I just have one clarifying question. In our lovely packet on package pages 42 and a few down, have the list of tables from section 150.490 for the B2 RW. And you've highlighted two tables. Those two, am I correct to assume that those two tables, when the commission approves the limitation that it's limited to only permitted uses, it only applies to permitted uses in those tables, or were there different reasons for highlighting those two tables?
Yep, so I can respond to that. So showing three things. Those tables identify all the uses that are allowed as permitted in that zoning district. They identify all the uses that are allowed as conditional in that zoning district. And then the yellow highlighted ones, which are only tables C for retail and table F for essentially the restaurant table. Those yellow highlighted ones were just the two tables that staff had recommended that the additional off-street parking relief be limited to. That was a staff recommendation 2 weeks ago. Under my understanding as to what the commission directed for findings of fact is that if this additional off-street parking relief is granted, it would apply to all the uses and all those tables that were P permitted that are non-residential uses, of course, for the B2RW.
Alex, anything? Okay. Do we want to hear from the petitioner, or does the petitioner want to speak to us?
Hey, is that okay?
Can you please state your name for the record?
And for the record, I was previously sworn in. My name is Cal Bernstein. I have 484 Central Avenue in Highland Park. I'm the attorney for the applicant who is here tonight. We don't have a presentation. We spent a lot of time at the last meeting regarding this, and Carl obviously does a very thorough job in detailing what we're requesting and the reason why. I just want to respond to a couple of the questions that I've heard tonight. Specifically, number one is we gave this example last time, and it's really going towards the restaurant use, which is the most intensive use, which requires the most parking. We pointed out last time that within a block of this property, there are 339 public parking spaces. That came right off the city's website. So we didn't make up that number. That came from the city. In addition, we also talked about certain hypothetical situations when where 100%, 50%, 75% or 50% of the available, and to correct Carl, the one thing is that the total commercial space is 4,874 square feet. But we looked at that last time showing if there's 100% was a restaurant, if 75 or 50, how much relief this translates into. And as Carl properly noted, that there are 18 spaces on site that are available and as we noted last time, that there are no other buildings on the block in the Ravinia neighborhood that has their own existing parking that is compliant with the new code, and that so the competition 2 doors down does not need to provide any parking, and that we provide 18 spaces or 15 if you deduct the 3 for the personal trainer. So we went through that. You can take, Carl, if you can put up that hypothetical, that exhibit we showed last time. Yours? Yes, please. This really shows, when we went through this, I'm not going to go over it again. It speaks for itself, but really, in the grand scheme of things, we're not asking for a lot of relief. And the whole purpose of doing this is so whenever there's a tenant, we're not running in and spending 3 months, not 4 months, the director noted last time, we'll spend 3 months going through a process, which is very expensive and time consuming and very, and it creates issues with trying to get tenants to sign up. So looking at that, as you can note, even under the worst case scenario, we're, if 100% of that's restaurants, there's again, 339 spaces in the area, 15, or actually there'll be 18 on site because it'll be 100%. If it's anywhere between 33 and 50% of floor space, we're talking about 8 or 10 parking spaces of a variance. And that's what we're requesting tonight. And what we're requesting is to be forward thinking. So the city understands the situation and basically just allows us to operate and rent the space that's available in a timely manner and not put this owner at a disadvantage versus its neighbors and its competition. So we don't have a presentation. If you can leave that up, that pretty much speaks for itself. We're available for questions. Changes between 2 weeks ago and today were basically cosmetic. There was just, unfortunately, Commission member Moore is not Moore, it was Arnold. She was the one who asked for the information. We were responding to her because, if you recall, she wanted some more connectivity between the lot in the back and the front. And we went back and we brainstormed and we determined that to create that connectivity, a couple signs, some lighting, and we think that would be sufficient. If she was here, hopefully she would say the same thing. So we're available for any questions you may have.
Questions from the commission for petitioner? Commissioner Hecht?
So the entire first floor of retail, including the personal trainers, obviously.
4784.
The 4874 includes
That includes the personal trainer.
Wait, 47? I thought it was 57, no?
No.
It's 900.
Yeah, there was an old plan when the PUD was done in 2014 or 2015. There was a 5,400 number that staff has gone back and found, but it's been changed since then because it includes some other additional space that's not included in the commercial space. So as of today, its total is 4874, and that includes the personal trainer.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify, because this variance would apply to that space too.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. And I will mention, let's say, for example, the personal trainer decide to expand, they have a lot lower parking requirement than a restaurant. We're talking, we came before you with the worst case scenario if this was all restaurant. But if there was, yes. But if there was, let's say, for example, there was some other use that had a less intensive parking requirement, then we'd be more compliant.
Right, no, but you're asking, the variance you're requesting is for the entire space.
Yes.
They'll allow current parking.
As a permitted use in the zoning district. So anything is, as I believe the chair noted, anything that's a permitted use, that is what we're focusing on. So we went, when we analyzed this, we said, what's the most intensive permitted use for this space? And that's restaurant space. And that's why we use those numbers. But in reality, if there's a permitted use with a less intensive parking requirement, then we're closer to compliant or even compliant. We're just taking the worst case scenario if all of this was restaurant.
Commissioner Hecht, could you please double check your mic is on and point it to your, thank you.
Hey, people accuse me of speaking too loudly, so I try to, I get yelled at a
Our
lot.
tech guy, so just thanks.
Okay,
From above.
I can speak loudly. Go ahead, that's all I had.
Commissioner Mantis?
So the packet noted that it sounds like you already have LOI prospective tenants for the 2 remaining spaces, right?
Signed lease for one, and we're negotiating somebody else.
Okay, so you have at least a lease in place for one and an LOI on the other, so,
We're negotiating.
yeah, I mean, non-binding, right? So theoretically, if this were to be approved, those spaces are ready to be occupied, right? Because, I mean, I guess what gives me pause is doing this proactively without having a tenant in hand and letting you go shop for one rather than having a request where we can get those spaces filled.
Yeah, I mean, roughly about 2,300 square feet, if I'm correct, is it less? 21, excuse me, 2,100 square feet is going to be a restaurant. But then again, that's the entire restaurant. That doesn't get applicable to because they have to do the site, the layout of the restaurant and how much is floor space, how much, I think we talked about back room and front room, and the back room doesn't count towards the square footage for the parking count. So we feel that we're not going to meet the current requirement but we're going to be pretty close.
That Happy Sushi,
Yes.
just mentioned it last time.
Yes, it's public record. It's in the record, it's public knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a signed lease last time.
It was.
Said they were interested. But
No,
okay.
no, it was a sign. It was, what I mentioned, they were interested when we first filed the application. Between the application and presenting 2 weeks ago, they were able to do a lease.
Okay.
Commissioner Henry? Question?
Thank you.
Jackson?
I have one quick question. Carl, could you pull up the map on packet page? I think it's like 18. So you say you have 21 commercial spaces, correct? On the property right now?
We have 18, there are 21 total, but 3 of those are handicap accessible.
So which of those spaces on the screen are the commercial ones?
You know your space. You were sworn this.
Okay, first, we're going to need your name,
Julia Claremont.
and were you sworn at the previous hearing? Okay.
These are 2 of the accessible spaces. The third one is in the garage. These garage spaces are solely for the apartment tenants. So the commercial spaces, we have a total of 21, 3 of which are allocated to the personal trainer. So we have these here, we have these, this, and these 2.
Are those clearly marked that they're commercial spaces?
The ones that are for the apartments are marked reserved with assigned numbers,
Okay.
and then the rest are for commercial.
Because, you know,
Yes.
you and I know there are 21 commercial spaces, but someone who drives into the building.
The
doesn't.
apartment units are marked reserved.
Perfect, thank you.
Ellen? Hey. Any members of the public who wish to speak this evening? We're good. It's. Would you please come up to the microphone, state your name, and I believe you were previously sworn, is that correct?
Chair, before we get there,
Yes.
I think procedurally, the witness would like to conduct some cross-examination, correct?
Would you,
I was just going to say that we didn't end up with spaces. They ended up with 18.
Well, I just want to say procedurally, if the witness wished to ask cross-examination questions, what I would advise is that testimony should be given first, and then any questions that they have should be put toward the end, perhaps after their 3 minutes.
okay.
I just,
Do you,
my name is Gail Schomburg, SCHOMBURG. I live at 578 Roger Williams Avenue.
we don't need addresses anymore. That's new city policy. Thank you. The other question, Corporation Counsel, is if to cross-examine, you have to register ahead of time, is that correct?
Yes, and my understanding is she did submit
Did you,
that.
you have registered?
I was told I could come up. I have questions to ask.
Of
I'm not
the-
cross-examining anybody.
I think that's what I mean. Do you have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I don't.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have, excuse me, if you have any testimony that are not questions of the applicant, if you could give that first in 3 minutes, and then we'll go to the questions.
Okay, no, this is just questions.
Okay?
Okay.
Do we need, who wants to respond for the applicant, or do you want to? All right, so let's hear the questions first.
Have a witness box.
It may make sense for her to list all her questions as she has them now, and then as appropriate, whoever has the answer can come up and answer it after she's.
That sounds good to me. Okay, you may proceed.
First of all, bear with me. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? Obvious as soon as I open my mouth. Okay, I was confused because 2 weeks ago, the gentleman that built this building said that he had to get the variance in order to have a. I went over to Happy Sushi today, and they did say that they had a signed contract and that they were taking 2 storefronts. So I don't understand why the variance that's going to be the restaurant. I also don't understand that when this gentleman said that he had fixed things so that he could have a restaurant in there, that's the extra square footage, I don't know. And, oh, I'm sorry, shall I start again? Good. And I assume that there was a reason that you guys came up with a number of parking spaces that were allotted to that building to begin with, that was signed off on, and I assume that is some sort of law in Highland Park. And it seems to me that if you're going to take it and just throw the whole thing under one law when you're changing it, that it doesn't seem to me the best thing. I mean, there was a reason that law was put in effect. There was a reason that that was one of the reasons that they were allowed to build a building, is because they went along with that. Okay? I have no problem with Happy Sushi going in there. It's a smaller restaurant. They won't take as much. I don't know if they can buy any more of the land from the other housing development and add more spaces back there, because sometimes there are tons of spaces and lots of times there are none. And I don't understand where if he has a signed contract, now he's not just asking for the variance for the amount of square footage that Happy Sushi needs. Why would you ask for the whole thing? Because I thought that's what the process was, is that you found out how much space you needed and you asked for that variance. Okay, and I was asking about the value added, and you did part of this, maybe all of it for me, which was $5,000. I don't know where that money goes, what part of the city it goes to, and is that a common thing, and what else is included in the value added? Because if I wanted to give Highland Park money, I'd just give them money. Say, well, I think you could use this, take it. I wouldn't tie it on to the agreement of saying, we like this, we'll give you that. And I don't know if that's how this city works. I have no idea. So those are my questions.
Those are your questions. Okay, I will let the petitioner respond rather than give my interpretation of what I've read over these past few weeks. But I believe the question as to why they're not doing this individually for each restaurant or each signed lease is because they don't want to go through this process of amending the planned unit development every time someone leases space. This is a blanket agreement so that they can go ahead and lease all of the space, hopefully, without coming back here and having to spend time and money on that kind of red tape. I believe the $5,000 contribution is to the Ravinia District Business Association.
No, not the association. It would be to be expended within the TIF district is what we understand.
So
there.
it goes for neighborhood improvements
Correct.
in that district.
Who controls that? Who controls that fund?
My office,
So
the city manager, but yes, it's allocated to my
Okay,
office.
so that's-
Right. So we've done a number of improvements, a lighting project, we're doing a bike shelter project, we're doing a streetscape project before the end of the TIF, which is in 2028 as well.
I was told before that,
I'm sorry.
2028.
Not back and forth, we're gonna get your questions answered, and then we'll talk about extra time. Does the petitioner have any additional response? Okay, so I will give you another minute.
Okay, I was told before that when the spaces in front or the bar or the restaurants over there, that money was given to the city, and then it was used, put in the city coffers and used wherever the city wanted instead of staying in our neighborhood. That's why I wondered where it went. I get different answers every time I call up.
It's voted to the Ravinia Business District, isn't it?
If it went to the same TIF fund, it would have to be, that's the law.
Not in the general fund, if that's
Okay,
correct, it's not in the general.
Not, it would be dedicated to something in the general vicinity of the development, as all public benefits are.
Right, yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Whether it's in the general fund or contribute, whatever fund in the city it's contributed to, the monies are spent in an area within the general vicinity of the development for all public benefits. Yes, that's correct.
I don't know. I have the impression, right or wrong, that most businesses have different amounts of people that are in there during the day, which causes different parking places to be needed. And it seemed like restaurants are the ones that have the most people in them. So when you're giving someone carte blanche as to the number of people in a restaurant for the whole building, that covers, it's like writing someone a blank check to me, whereas most businesses would have less people in them, and that it would make more sense to try to keep that number down. It's my personal opinion.
Thank you very much. And I just will also point out, this has been testified to before, that this development is under rules that other businesses along that street do not have to follow, just because of the nature of it being a newer project and not an existing project, those spaces having never been leased. Thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank you for hearing me.
Absolutely. Okay, Commissioner Henry.
I have two things. One is an informational thing. I just want it to be stated for the record that Mr. Claremont is my landlord in my office in Highland Park. I don't think that's reason for recusal, but I just thought I should let people know that fortunately I signed a new lease before this started, so we're good. And then when he gets the leak done, we'll be really good. But I just felt that I should state that for the record, and upon advice of counsel, that I should state that for the record. But I do have a question for you, Mr. Bernstein. You indicated that there are 300 some odd spaces in the vicinity.
339.
And I'm looking at the report that was presented on behalf of this facility back in 2014. Which by virtue of the findings of fact that were presented, we incorporate into those findings, even though I suspect none of us have read it. And I don't mean to ambush you, but, you know, you took the job on. The report from Gewalt Hamilton Associates from 2014, that was the original part of this PUD, states that in their key findings under parking demand, that there are off-site parking spaces available between 117 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 147 at 9 o'clock, which is about half of what you say is available. So I'm curious, because as I said, we made, by virtue, I had a little time, I read through the findings of fact this afternoon, and we incorporate these prior applications and information into these findings of fact. And so where does 300 spaces come from? Well, what has changed? What has changed since 2014 through today in terms of parking in Ravinia?
Well, I would say what has changed from 2014 to today is 10 years. And there's a different tenant mix that's in the space. And you have to remember, whatever that parking study was, and regarding how much parking is being used, that's a snapshot in time. That's over 1 or 2 weekends in 2014. I don't think you could check your knowledge of the door of the area and the fact that things have changed in that area since then. And Joel's raising a hand, so he probably knows the answer better than I, because I have not seen that, what you're suggesting.
I hadn't seen it either, and frankly, it concerned me that we're putting in the findings of fact stuff that has been presented before that hasn't been before this commission, although we're about to do it. And my concern, as I said last week, my concern is this. I am not necessarily opposed to this application, but I believe our job as an advisory commission to the council is to develop as complete and convincing a record as we can to underlie whatever recommendation we make, so that they can take it and trust it and give credence to it, and that sort of thing. And stuff like this bothers me.
I appreciate that. I will, before I turn it over to the director, I would note that, you know, the 339 parking spaces came off of the city's website of the parking spaces in the area. I don't know the methodology of what Gaywell happens to do. Yeah.
Or I think to clarify that, from what you're looking at in that report, and I don't know that I was on a commission that far back, I think it was, but, are you talking about available empty parking spaces during certain hours because the rest are occupied? Yeah. And
It says, this is a chart of off-site parking space available unoccupied, including permit parking, Metro and 2-hour parking in the train station lots north and west, Pleasant Avenue, and both north and south sides of Roger Williams. That's what it says.
Director
that
Fontaine.
number and the 339 is a gross.
Can we hear
That's what
from
it is.
Director Fontaine, who may have answers to all this?
Number 330 is just the number of parking spaces. It's not saying that that's the number of available unoccupied parking spaces. It's just the parking spaces in that area. And so that report looked at, well, how available are those parking spaces? So it's two different things. I don't think the applicant represented that those are unutilized. I just, that's not what we intended, certainly as
No,
staff.
and we didn't, we just said this is the gross amount of parking within a block of the property.
I'm not trying to twist the facts or anything. I'm just looking at this and trying to see how it makes sense to the presentation that's before us last meeting and today.
And can I make a comment as well?
Yes, Senior Planner Burhop.
And also, just to respond to Commissioner Henry, of course, if the commission has problems with that finding, because I see the one finding you're referring to, that can always be amended as well.
Okay, before I go on, was there any other members of the public who wish to give testimony this evening? Seeing none. I believe you've had your chance. So, this is not a back and forth. I think we've pretty much given, I'm sorry, but just I don't want to keep this going all night. Is it the commission's pleasure to vote on these findings of fact this evening? Is that the?
Excuse me, Chair, if you're at that, I'd like to raise a question. If you're ready for a vote before you take a vote.
Well, I was kind of asking my fellow commissioners whether they are.
Okay.
But if you would like to comment, Council.
If that's exactly, I just wanted to, but I want to make sure that all the commissioners are done with their questions, that's all. Because then I do have some.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I really want to commend both the petitioner and staff, because I really think there were certain questions asked by one of the commissioners, and everything with regard to lighting and the path and everything. And I think that staff really made quite the effort to make sure that this is moving along. It is on the city council's next agenda. And I do have several questions, which council member I would usually ask at the city council meeting. But in light of the fact that everybody seems to want to really move this along right now, if I'm happy to hold those off until the city council meeting, or I could ask them now so you could be prepared which in many ways, because we're trying to streamline things here, I wanted to ask the chair and legal counsel.
I just assumed we would be on the consent agenda of the city council.
Yeah, right, you might be. You won't last very long.
No, you get your time at the city council meeting to ask the questions that you need for the city council.
Well, that's fine. I just was going to ask about brevity. That's the only reason I'm
I
asking
know,
them
but
now.
it's our brevity too,
Oh, no,
right?
no.
So you're trading our brevity for yours over at the council. I'm not sure that's correct.
I'm trading it for the petitioners, because if the petitioner can have answers, I think they will have a much greater chance of success in a few days. So I would defer, with all due respect, to council as to how we should handle this.
Well, okay.
Presiding officer, as to whether, who should be heard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I believe that the proper venue for those questions is the city council at this point. So, do we wish to move forward?
I think there's also, and because there's only 4 of us, and for this to pass requires all 4 of us. It's
No,
correct,
that's
right?
not correct.
But it's a quorum of, it's
Majority of the
a
quorum.
majority of the quorum?
Right, a quorum being present, a majority of those present.
Oh, okay, that's not how I did it, but I stand corrected.
Yeah,
Oh, I knew that too, but I thought that was the same here.
I asked that question
Okay,
for the very same reason.
yeah, okay, well, in that case, then,
All right, well, then I would be looking for a motion to approve the finding of fact for an amendment to a special use permit in the nature of a plan development for modifications to the off-street parking requirements and design review for 555 Roger Williams Avenue, including these 3 conditions of approval: that the off-street parking relief is limited to non-residential permitted uses listed as P in section 150.490 for the B2 RW zoning district. 2, the applicant must verify compliance to section 150.605 for the new exterior lighting proposed and color coordinated temperature in Kelvin of no greater than 3,000 Kelvin CCT. 3rd, the applicant is to provide code compliant sign directing traffic to on-site parking spaces. Do I have such a motion?
Just to make a quick tweak to the motion, it would be a recommendation for approval of the requested relief and subject to the conditions and adoption of the findings of fact.
Correct. Hearing no motion on the table, is there any other motion that someone would like to make, including continuing this hearing? Or a motion to deny?
if I may just make a comment, I share Commissioner Mantis's concerns about a blanket authorization opposed to for specific leases that have been signed or that maybe if we're at the LOI stage. That's something that concerned me. I was very happy to hear that you actually have a lease signed and that this is, there's somebody that's waiting on approval here today. My discomfort is in doing this without even knowing who's going to go into the other spaces. I would be more than comfortable with doing this for the existing lease that's been signed and getting that approved. All right, there's a new one, we should look at that one and look at the circumstances of that one.
No, not right now.
That's just my feelings about it.
Deliberating right now, unless you have a question for the petitioner.
Is it possible to put a sunset on the findings of fact so that if they don't fill the space in a certain amount of time, reverts back to what was last approved?
That's our recommendation.
I sure we could make that a condition, yes?
That sounds like a condition that's, as you know, you may make conditions that are related or have a nexus to the relief asked. It's unusual. I don't have any reason to think that you cannot. In fact, I think that we have done that in the past. And so at this point, I would say that if that is a condition that you'd like to make, you can make that as part of the motion for approval to a specific date.
Why is it problematic? No, it would sunset for vacant.
Use the microphones.
I think that's what I think Commissioner Mantis is going with. That it wouldn't sunset for Happy Sushi because there's a lease. The problem would be if this sunsets, what happens when there's a sunset provision? What happens if Happy Sushi, and I assume you signed a 5-year deal, leaves in 5 years and it's vacant? Does the relief sunset? That would have to be drafted.
I mean,
And
The wording on that. before I would-
one of the other things, not to take up the applicant's position on this, but what they're trying to do, and I get it, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it, is they want to avoid having to come back here time after time. That's the reason, on to the member of the public's comment, that they're doing this for the whole. We have made an a comment on both last meeting and today. So I understand the rationale for that.
I think you should explain.
Director Fontaine.
So if the space is tenanted and then the tenant leaves, it could be re-tenanted under the repark rule. The repark rule was passed by City Council unanimously.
And then they're in the same position as everybody else. But if you sunset it, then they're not. That's what we're just.
Concerns me of whether that would.
Well, if you
impact
set
the
a
repark.
sunset provision and have this ordinance, then recognize that that sunset provision shall, notwithstanding other provisions of the zoning code, persist, then yeah, you can do that. I'm just pointing out, there was a question if I'm not saying, I didn't say whether you should or shouldn't, I just said you could, but I just pointed out that in the case that you pointed out where there was Happy Sushi and they left, they could re-tenant that space through the repark rule without coming back unless you as a commission and the council adopts some ordinance that says otherwise.
I guess to clarify, my thought was a sunset provision that would incentivize them to occupy the spaces, in whatever it is, 12, 18, 24 months, or the blanket variance goes away, right? Not necessarily that it sunsets after those are tenanted, right? So I want to create the incentive to actually occupy those spaces rather than leave them vacant.
So it would stay in effect for Happy Sushi, which has a lease, but it would expire for the rest of the space, is what you're suggesting.
Which is a great way of kind of getting them into the system. That way they don't have this hanging over them. But if that's the case, why not come to you and know what the 33% or the 50%, so you actually know what you're talking about in terms of what relief they're asking for.
Okay, so I need a motion of some type because I can't just let this hang. So who wishes to do what?
That's a very good question.
Can I have a motion to continue this matter to March 19th?
Is that our next meeting, 19th?
Yes.
19th is our next meeting, Sure.
Does anybody want to do, no one wants to do that?
I'm the new kid,
This
I'm
chair
the
all
new kid on the
night.
block.
Well,
But not doing anything is worse than nothing. So I would like to see us explore Commissioner Mantis's suggestion to see how we would frame that in terms of recommending to the council, which can do whatever it wants anyway, frankly.
Since it's on your agenda and on our agenda, clearly we are asking for some recommendation from you.
Right. And
necessarily waiting.
as I've maintained, as I believe, we owe it to the council and to the applicant to do our job to develop as complete a record supporting whatever recommendation we make. So it seems to me we're kind of undecided and frankly might benefit from the counsel of the rest of the commission being present as well. So I would make a motion to continue it to the next regularly scheduled meeting of this commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to continue this hearing to the next meeting date of the Highland Park Plan and Design Commission, which is March 19th.
All right, 7 p.m.
Address the board.
Nope, you cannot.
Just for the record, I've asked to address the board.
Did it?
You're continuing without asking our even our opinion on the continuance. So it's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, take the stand again. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Cal Bernstein. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. This is, we're being thrown a curveball right now, and I'll be honest, it is a curveball. We had an extensive hearing last time. There was an opportunity for this commission to deliberate and to ask us questions. And then all the questions were asked, that this commission deliberated, and there was no conversations regarding sunset provisions. There was no conversations about anybody feeling uncomfortable with this. I recall, if we went back and watched the tape, it appears that each one of the members, except for member Henry, was in favor of the request. You then voted 6-1 to draft findings of fact consistent with your deliberations in February. Then you come back here, it was the only request that was made between February and now was by member Arnold, who was not even here tonight. But the only request that was made of the applicant, who's trying to comply with the requests of this commission, the only request made was to show some connectivity between the parking and the space. And what did we do? We worked hard and we did that. And now we brought this back to you. In fairness to the applicant, we have a lease with Happy Sushi that is cancelable if we don't get relief, because we don't have the parking. You're basically creating an unlevel playing field where you have, you're prejudicing this owner versus every single one of his neighbors and the people on the street. We talked about it ad nauseum at the last meeting about how things have changed and while we did provide parking back in 2016 and 2014, whenever the approval was made, member Henry probably knows because he's already reviewed this afternoon, but whatever that was done, things have changed. We talked about it for an extensive period of time at the last meeting. We were here tonight to determine whether the findings of fact were consistent with what this board's deliberation was last 2 weeks ago, but for the changes that we made tonight. And I think, the fact of the matter is that time is of the essence. I got up here last time and I said, we don't want to have a situation where it's going to take 4 months, 5 months to get relief every time we bring a tenant in here. And I was admonished by the director of community development who said, no, it's not 4 months, it's actually 3 months. And now what are we turning into? This was filed, I go back and look at this. This was filed back in the beginning of January. Now we're going into, hear me out, please. Now we're going into April. And what we're trying to do is, remember Henry was correctly noted, is that we're trying to fix the situation with this building so it is viable, economic viable going forward. We just we can't have a sunset provision. We can't keep coming in here on a piecemeal basis because then you're putting them in an economic disadvantage. This commission will do what they want. There's 4 people here. We were just following the direction the commission made last time, and now all of a sudden you've taken a different off-ramp, and I think that's unfair.
Thank you for your, thank you. Okay,
Just, it depends on how much is the dining room. The reason I'm asking this is there's a, it's reduced based on how much is dining room versus kitchen, and I actually wonder, and the reason I was asking is I'm like wondering, does Happy Sushi actually make you non-compliant based on those percentages? It's close, but you know, if Happy Sushi doesn't make you non-compliant, you can proceed with them now because you have the parking. It's the additional vacancies that present the problem. I don't know that that's the case or not. And if indeed Happy Sushi would make you non-compliant, then there's certainly a more time-sensitive issue tonight. So, I'm also commenting, I was reluctant to second the motion to continue because I constantly rail against the city for taking too long. So I hear what you're saying. Can you actually address it? Let me know how many parking spaces would actually be required for Happy Sushi?
Is that a question for the applicant?
Or staff, I don't know who can answer that.
I mean, I can respond.
yes,
Okay, well, if we don't know, we don't know.
all right, there's a motion on the table to continue this matter to March 19th. Is a roll call vote, yes?
Usually not, but in this case, I would do a roll call.
I would do it too, yeah.
Roll call, okay. Commissioner Henry? Yes. Commissioner Mantis?
I would prefer to get it to city council sooner than later, so I'm going to say no.
Commissioner Hecht?
No.
And Vice Chair Kirsch? Chair Kirsch?
No.
The motion does not carry.
Okay, then I will once again ask for a motion regarding these findings of fact.
And related conditions.
And really, yeah, I think I read, I don't want to read it all again, because I
But I
forgot
just
my
want to make
water.
sure it
I
included
forgot
the
my water
conditions.
bottle
And
tonight.
the conditions that are on the slide are also on the first page of the findings of fact.
Right, it's just important that we know which conditions we're talking about, yeah.
Or I get a motion denying the findings of fact. I need a motion of some kind.
Question? I mean,
Yes.
and this is probably directed at the applicant, but I mean, so there is no world in which a sunset provision is acceptable.
I just, whether there is or not, the bigger question is if you want to act tonight, I don't think we can act on drafting a sunset provision tonight. That is too complicated, at least for me to comprehend, and doing it by amending these current findings of fact with whatever we do. So I just,
Let me try to make a motion if I can. I think, and Corporation Counsel can opine whether I'm doing this properly. I move I move for approval of the draft findings of fact, recommending approval of the application as submitted with adding the following recommendations to the city council that they consider. An appropriate sunset provision, but for any vacant space that is currently vacant and that remains vacant for at least 2 years from the date of approval. I'm not including that in the formal recommendation, it's a suggestion.
And before that receives a second, I would like to comment on that. And it is particularly why Liaison Councilmember Litterer is present, to give suggestions as you've given them, all informal suggestions and context to the city council. And so I don't think it would be necessary in order to make the motion. I think it's enough to make the motion recommending approval, adopting the findings of fact, and she has heard the concerns as to a sunset provision, and from what I heard, a 2-year sunset provision, but to recommend them to consider is just a bit,
It's not.
it starts to become tenuous.
I'm not looking to put that in the findings of fact. I'm just making a statement of saying you should consider this. I'm not even
Very
saying,
helpful.
I'm not
It's
even
very
saying you should do it. I don't know, it's just a thought, to put in the record, maybe.
Chair, we could do, if I may propose.
Yes.
Instead of
Director
having that
Fontaine.
be part of the formal recommendation from the commission, we can certainly note that in the request for council action, that there was this note from Commissioner Hecht as to this specific matter. We can put that in the memo as opposed to any of the findings of fact or the recommendation, the official recommendation, if that's what the commission chooses.
Yeah, I'm honestly trying to find a way to get this passed tonight.
Point of information here going forward, because again, I think we're all trying to move it along and trying to get
That's why I'm
something on
saying.
it. So I can't thank you enough for this discussion, because I assure you, between the minutes and council, we will make sure it's represented. But usually findings of fact, and we ask them to be drafted up, you all would have something to look at and then to present to us. But I still don't see that there's anything in the findings of fact other than this sort of blanket proposal, which is not the norm for looking at an application, because there's no actual application. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear in that if you approve the findings of fact, what they actually state are that this is the situation and nothing more or less.
I think that's correct. I'm just trying to put some comments in the record so that to make my fellow commissioners more comfortable, honestly, because I understand where Commissioner Mantis is coming from. I also understand how the difficulty in trying to draft that. I've tried to draft them myself in context in these kinds of situations, and it's not easy. And I don't want to hold the applicant up either. So I'm basically putting the burden on you.
Thanks, but the only other thing I will add, I do think it's important in light of council, not our council's comments. I think there was consensus from this group and a request for findings of fact. That did not mean that there were no questions.
Right.
And I think that that's a very important distinction to be made, because that was not my sense of what the meeting was. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to ask a question before I represent anything at the meeting on Monday. So thank you.
So what is the motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, then I'll do this again. Okay. I move that we approve.
Recommend.
What?
Recommend approval.
No, I get in there. I move that we approve the draft findings of fact recommending approval of the application as presented
With the three conditions.
with the three conditions.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Mr. Fontaine, Director Fontaine, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Henry.
No.
Commissioner Mantis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hecht.
Aye.
Chair Kirsch.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion carries, and this item is recommended to City Council for approval with the conditions as stated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey. Okay, that closes that public hearing. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a continuation of public hearing number 2023 ZTA 010 for a zoning code text amendment to modify regulations for tents and similar structures and other sections of the zoning code, chapter 150, city code, as appropriate. Senior Planner Burhop, is there an update?
Thank you, Chair. This is a short presentation. My name is Carl Burhop. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department Planning Division. This is the presentation on a zoning text amendment for tent regulations. Recommendation, somewhat of a standard slide. So the commission should reopen the public hearing, take testimony, consider the request, and deliberate. And provide feedback if appropriate. If appropriate, the PDC, Plan and Design Commission, can adopt the FOF findings of fact recommending approval. So there was an ordinance in the packet. I did indicate that that was updated this afternoon, and I did provide those track changes. So there is an ordinance in there. Then, of course, there was also the findings of fact. Those were also in the packet. I think this is my last slide. So these are the changes. So this went to several meetings, was documented in the report. Here we are at this meeting. So what does this ordinance accomplish? What does it codify? It makes it clear that tents are allowed as temporary accessory structures because they're going to be housed in the accessory use section of Article 4. It will allow tents associated with residential uses, where the residential use is a principal use, for up to 30 days with one 15-day extension per calendar year. Then on those properties with non-residential principal uses, for up to 120 days with one 30-day extension per calendar year. The changes, which were in the zoning code and in the building code, will require a permit for all tents that are over 150 square feet in area. We'll have to have a permit. Also, there's a clause in the ordinance or a regulation in the ordinance where tents were specifically approved by ordinance, including a planned development or a special use permit, that's a PUD or SUP. The ordinance requirements for the tents will supersede. Finally, allow exceptions during a period of a state of emergency officially declared by the city of Highland Park as appropriate. I can take questions if there are any.
Questions for staff? Do we have any public comments on the zoning text amendment for tents?
No public comment.
Do I have a motion on tents?
Hopefully.
Oh,
I'm not.
Okay. All right. Why'd you have to ask? No.
So I'd be looking for a motion that would approve the findings of fact recommending the zoning code text amendment ZTA 010, modifying regulations for tents and similar structures. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second, is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? Director Fontaine, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Henry,
Aye.
Commissioner Mantis,
Aye.
Commissioner Hecht,
Aye.
and Chair Kirsch.
Aye.
Motion carries. This is recommended to council for approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Our third and final continued public hearing tonight is number 2024 ZTA 001 for a zoning code text amendment to modify the plan development regulations to allow modifications to chapter 173 for fences, to modify non-conforming regulations related to fences, and to modify other related regulations regarding fences. Senior Planner Burhop, do you have an update this evening
Yes.
on fences?
Carl Burhop. I'm a senior planner with the City of Highland Park Community Development Department Planning Division. There's a presentation on a zoning code text amendment, zoning text amendment related to fence regulations. This will also, there are also related amendments proposed for Chapter 173, which is the fence and flagpole code of the city. Again, the standard slides. Recommend the commission reopen the public hearing, take testimony, consider the request and deliberate and provide feedback. For this one, this is a request for feedback. There was no findings of fact and there was no ordinance in the packet. So if, as appropriate, staff will return with an ordinance or findings of fact. The purpose of this amendment is to add property rights for property owners for fences and streamline variation and modification processes. This is partially a Chapter 150 zoning code text amendment, which requires a public hearing and a recommendation by the Plan and Design Commission, the PDC. This is also related. There will be changes to Chapter 173 fence and flagpole regulations. Okay, staff updates. I had 4 things on my list, and I'm going to open several things real quick. There were commission comments about unimproved right-of-way ROW right-of-way, so I have a exhibit on that. Open fence, open type exhibit, I have a slide or whatever on that. Variation data, which I will run through very quickly, and then a higher road order exhibit. So how do I want to do this? Traffic visibility, let's come back. So we provided several exhibits, and I'll just try to go through these fast. If there's questions, I'll take them. So this attachment is about unimproved right-of-way. So one of the staff recommendations was that the commission consider a change to the necessary codes that will allow a fence up to 6 feet in height if it's in a required front yard, but that front yard is along a right-of-way that's not improved with an actual street. And so this happens. And so a lot of these, well, I have the data obviously, so I'll back up my general phrases here in a moment when I get to the data. But the Zoning Board of Appeals see these situations where there are properties along a right-of-way that is unimproved, but by zoning code definition, it's still a front property line, and so the fence height is limited to 4 feet in height, even though it may make sense that they go up to 6 feet in height, and even though that the Zoning Board of Appeals statistically approves the overwhelming majority of those that submit. And again, I have the data and it was in the report. So here, I don't know if you can see, this was in the packet. This is a right-of-way here. There's also a right-of-way here. So when you look at these properties on this cul-de-sac, this is actually a double corner lot. This is a through lot. This is a through lot. Of course, if you're on those properties, it doesn't seem like that at all. But by zoning code definition, that's what they are. And of course, I'll channel Commissioners Hecht and Henry's experiences from the Zoning Board of Appeals as well. And these are just photos that my colleague, Planner 2 Hoffman, took. I mean, they were in the packet, but basically they just show, you know, there's no street there. It's trees. This is just another example, same thing. This is where Edgecliff Drive runs out into the Lake Michigan. So there's right-of-way, but there's no street. And so here you can see this property here is technically a corner lot and has a front yard along the south, even though if functionally it looks like a side yard. And then considerable for those properties here. So again, what's staff's recommendation? Staff's recommendation is that these situations are happening, and the Zoning Board of Appeals is overwhelmingly approving these when they come through. And so the consideration is to allow these properties to treat this like it's a side yard and go up to 6 feet in height. Specifically in these unimproved situations, staff further recommends that they do record a covenant against the property, thus that if the right-of-way is ever improved, they'll have to return the fence to conformance. Oh, this one, Berkeley. Yep. I mean, I think this property did get a variation actually in their front yard, if I remember correct, for solar panels encroaching within a required front yard. Of course, our recommendation is only for fence, doesn't pertain to solar panels. But again, these are the types of properties that tend to submit for variations because this property, if you're actually there, I mean, the street stops, but the right-of-way continues. I think, yeah, that's a good picture that shows it. Okay, and then this is the same. Okay, open type fences. I actually, this item will hopefully be continued because regardless, staff will still request a continuance, whether it's prepare findings of fact or answer more questions or whatever it is. But I do want to bring back, I have a little bit more research. I want to bring the commission on open type fences. So these were in the packet, but I will roll through these now because what we're trying to find, and this is taking longer than I thought it would, this gets to the traffic visibility. So one of staff's, so yeah, let me switch gears. Let's talk about traffic visibility. Staff is not recommending any changes for corner lots. I want to be clear on that. Staff is suggesting the commission consider allowing open-type fences within the traffic visibility zone where driveways meet the property line and where alleyways meet a street. That is what staff is recommending. And we did some research on other communities. It was 20-some. The stats I believe, are in the report as to how many we did. But I was able to look at that between the last meeting and this meeting, and it turns out actually most of them do have similar regulations to what Highland Park currently does have. Most of them actually do require that you either have to drop down to 3 feet or you have to pull it back at an angle, at a 10-foot by 10-foot right triangle, whatever the hypotenuse is on that. So most actually do have that. And so what I want to provide to the commission, and what I'm going to try to find before this comes back again, so like take this fence, for example, I want to find the actual spec sheet to see what the actual opening percentage is. Because what I want to do is I want to put up a photo, and I want to say to the commission, well, this is 60% open or 70% open. Then the commission can just judge for themselves if you can see through it or not.
Yes, Director Fontaine.
So just as a practical matter, just to add a little context, I think we said this last time, but I just want to make it clear. So, we get requests from residents and, this is an ongoing debate. When we say that you have to do this, staff time is expended, people are not happy, and it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, as a practical matter, for instance, this case, it's like, they don't get it. And so respectfully, neither the staff. It's like, so we understand the concept of visibility, but when you look at something like this, are you really not going to see the car if you're walking there? And so this is what residents say. And they're like, so you're telling me I can't do this, but they're like, why? So I just wanted to give you that background to that. Having said that, Carl points out that a lot of communities have this rule like us. And that's, it's true. I mean, it's well-intentioned, and we do think if it wasn't an open fence, we would understand. Yeah, and we don't want that either. But what about for the open fences? So thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
And then the last series of photos I have to go through is the higher order road exhibit. So these are examples, and we had a few in the last packet, but these are just a few more to hammer home the point. So Clavey Road is either an arterial or a collector. I think it's a collector, but in either event, it falls under a higher order road. It's not a local road. And so these properties here, actually, you know what, this example was in the last report. I always choose this one. But here's a photo of it. Well, again, these are through lots. And so that means they have front yards on the north and the south. Of course, on the south, functionally, that's a backyard. And so what happens a lot is these property owners come to staff and they say, listen, this is my backyard on the back. I need a 6-foot high fence. We don't want to see the traffic. It mitigates sound. And staff are compelled to enforce the strict regulations of code. And we say, no, we can't allow that by a permitting process. The only way to proceed is if you think you meet the standards of approval, you can go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And by and large, the Zoning Board of Appeals overwhelmingly approves these. And again, the stats are in the report to back that up. This is along Deerfield Road. So the former Toys R Us and then the Dual. So this is a road where, this is an arterial, I forget which type, but it is an arterial. Along the west, I mean, the fence is 8 feet in height. So in this specific example, and actually I have a map, I'll try to keep this, I should go a little faster. But on here, it's actually 8 feet in height. And on this specific segment, there are 2 specific segments of arterials, as well as Highway 41 within the city, where staff are actually recommending those are kind of the most unique and extreme situation where actually in that situation, it should be 8 foot in height. And actually, if you drive there, you'll see there already is a fence, I think along both of these blocks, but at least one for sure that's there and is 8 feet in height. I think that's a photo. And then this is just by our city offices. And again, through lots, same thing. And this example was actually in the report. Oh, and then here's the, so yeah, this is a good map to kind of wrap up this point. So what staff are proposing that the commission consider is that for all higher order roads, there be a change of code. Specifically, this would only apply to functional backyards, and it would allow up to 8 feet in height by right anywhere along Highway 41, and then along these select yellow outlined arterials along Deerfield, and then the select arterial along Half Day Road. And I think I actually provided the street boundaries and municipal boundaries in the report. Okay, are there any questions so far, or should I continue?
One, if I heard you correctly, one of the situations is where you have dedicated right-of-way that's not been approved. And you talked about there would be, if with that, okay, well, with this text amendment, those that it's a functionally a side yard, but it's really a front yard.
Yeah, or it could be a functional rear.
Put a 6-foot fence, unless that unimproved right-of-way gets improved.
So the idea of that specifically, the idea was that it could be a covenant recorded against the property that stipulates, correct, if it's ever improved, then you got to bring it into compliance. So that's just a suggestion. It doesn't have to be that way.
Fair to make people tear down a fence.
It probably still wouldn't be a front yard, functional front yard, even if they built the right of way.
Well, zoning code would, of course it would be, but functionally,
Oh, but I mean,
if it wasn't before, then it wouldn't be unless they tore down the home and rebuilt it, or realigned the front door, or realigned the driveway, or address, et cetera.
well, the ZBA does need some work to do, don't they? I mean,
Just one other thing, the covenant doesn't have to be written such that it tells anyone to tear down an existing fence. What it could say is it could not be replaced with a new fence that was above the height limit. Do you see, I mean, we can, however, direct, however the commission decides, but that would be a more reasonable approach with the covenant, and I think it's what staff was intended.
any other,
Well, having seen many of these petitions, having served on the zoning board for 8 years, and
Sorry, I didn't cut you off. That was actually my question, is if something like this stays the same and it's approved by the ZBA, is that covenant, will there be such a covenant in that circumstance?
Yeah, but it's approved by the ZBA, the approval's good forever unless it states otherwise.
It doesn't, okay.
And what we're saying, though, is to codify these things by right, though, obviously, where they don't have to go to the ZBA.
right, well, that's,
I want it to be the same. If we're making it as of right, I don't want it to be different than if than what happens with the ZBA.
yeah, which makes, as I was about to say, many of these petitions, as has Commissioner Heck, since he helped me cut my teeth in the zoning when I came on, him and Bennett Lasky. What I'm seeing in this is that what we're trying to do is just make this process simpler and easier for homeowners, so that when it's observed that it's on Half Day Road, or it's on Clavey, or it's on Lake Cook, or something like that, they want to put up a bigger fence, they don't have to come spending the time, energy, and effort, and money, potentially, coming to the ZBA. Although, to the chair's comment, the ZBA's got to have some.
Well, there's also,
That's, am I viewing this the right way? This is just to kind of streamline the system and make it a little simpler for residents.
This is my first slide. Purpose of this amendment is to add rights for property owners and streamline variation modification. Precisely.
and to add to that, it's also to direct a practical need. It's to address a practical need, right? So there's a different for the fencing when you're facing a road like that as opposed different type of road, right? Because of the traffic, the noise, and other things like that. So if there's a need, it provides more rights to address that need, and it does so in a streamlined fashion. So that's all I'd add to that, yeah.
Any other feedback for staff? Are you, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I do have a question. If, to move forward on this, you want the provision changing the visibility and fencing on corners and driveways and stuff as part of this findings of fact? Because that may, I can see wanting to continue the hearing so that we can address all that in one fell swoop, as opposed to piecemeal.
I'm just, would it be better to order some findings of fact tonight? Would that help you at all? Or, I mean, I think this presentation is pretty complete as it is.
That would be helpful, yes.
So
We
if
certainly
that's
can come
the-
back with additional information that Carl was going to provide anyway, along with the findings, if
Yeah,
that's how
okay.
you direct.
Would anyone like to make such a motion?
Oh, one moment. Can I just
Just go ahead.
apologize? I just want to make sure I know the points.
I thought you were on the last slide.
Well, yeah, there were several other recommendations, but I don't need to repeat those. My understanding was that there was already a consensus on the other recommended changes from the meeting before. That was for the PUDs, planned unit developments, so that they can include fence chapter variations, and then also to allow PUC to consider fence height variations if they're already in for fence material variation. These were discussed a month ago. I'm just
That generally streamlines things.
court ones, the sports court that allow up to 10 feet in height for fences for sports courts, but they have to meet the required setbacks for a sports court. That was it. That's all I had.
The sports courts that are hockey rinks in the front yards of Sheridan Road.
There was a patio.
It was before the definition of sport court was added to the code.
A patio that had ice and lights.
Yeah.
All right.
First meeting.
Yeah, and before, I would also, before a motion is made, this is a public hearing. I didn't know if there were public comments.
Yes, that's true. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment on fences? They do. If they have good fences.
Neighbors, yeah.
So what is the pleasure of the commission? Do we want to ask for findings of fact? Do we want to just continue this for more discussion?
I move that we direct staff to draft findings of fact recommending approval of the application as presented.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion, further discussion? Director Fontaine, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Henry.
Sorry,
Commissioner Mantis.
Aye.
Commissioner Heck.
Aye.
And Chair Kirsch.
Aye.
Guys have it. Motion carries. This item is recommended for approval. Directed to staff to draft findings of fact recommending approval for your, what meeting would you?
Well, so
Matter to, because we do need a continuation. So that's directing staff to do the findings of fact, recommending approval. What meeting do you think?
So if we want to have the ordinance, then I would not do in 2 weeks. We could try for 4 weeks in April 2nd.
Sounds good to me.
May not make that one, but I think April 2nd is one we should try for.
Yeah, we'll need a motion to,
Continue the public hearing on this matter to April 2nd, 2024.
is there a second?
Please.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then this public hearing will be continued to the meeting, the regular Plan and Design Commission meeting on April 2nd. Notice is,
Actual, and it'll be in this room at 7 p.m., City Hall, Council Chambers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other business. Administrative design review update.
Already reported on the approval by council, a ratification of a minor amendment to their PUD related to design review. That was administratively by staff. In terms of a case briefing, a legislative item related to the repark rule was passed by city council, vote 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for tonight.
And our next regular meeting in 2 weeks, March 19th. Do we have a preview?
Yes, I believe there will be only one item. It will be for the Park District Golf Dome at 2205 Skokie Valley Road on the highway to the north of Target. They are replacing that dome and they will be associated with that.
The membrane dome. There is a difference in the building code. Membrane. I think it's a.
Well, they got to get a permit either way. Right? Case briefing.
I provided the case briefing. Yes. No.
Briefing in the, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. I mixed the design review with the case briefing,
Oh,
Mr.
boy.
Chair. My fault. Yeah.
Is there any other business from the public?
Can I make one comment?
You may certainly make one comment, Commissioner Heck.
And I don't know if this has been discussed, but we originally started these meetings at 7:30 and then moved it back to 6:30. I believe there was one commissioner that, and I'm going to draw, I can picture him, who wanted to end earlier. Then we kind of compromised at 7 because there was issues. I don't think any other commission starts as early as we do. Am I correct?
That's not true.
That's not correct. There's
Not
6
correct.
o'clock, there's 5 o'clock, there's different ones. What I will say, what happened over the years is we had to put a final on the timing for ending this meeting. And the limit is now 10. For a couple of PDC meetings when I was a commissioner, that would go till 11. It was
4 hours. 3 hours.
Yeah, so.
Right. 3 hours. So 10.
I just been meaning to ask the question,
But
so.
if there's a request, what is considered every year?
No, I find it interesting because on the zoning board, we didn't have it. Our belief being that we never really knew how long those hearings were going to take. And particularly when people were waiting to get their zoning application acted on, whether yay or nay, that they deserved to have their day. And if they were scheduled for that day, we always tried, and I think Commissioner wouldn't disagree, we always tried to get it in. If it meant staying, we did that upon occasion.
Had meetings here that would go in past midnight. And both commissions that I've been on done it, so, I just wanted to question, because I didn't know the answer, about when other commissions started, but.
The library board never went past 10 o'clock. I don't think we ever passed 9.
Director Fontaine.
Couple things. So the Housing Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission started at 6:30. There are other commissions and advisory groups that start at different 6 o'clock and other hours. So just in terms of the time, we did do our rules and regs recently, and we took out of the rules and regs the specific time, but it substituted in its place a number of hours, so that whenever the meeting started, we would know that we have a particular length, and it was 3 hours. So for this commission, because you start at 7, it would go for 3 hours to 10. If it was a 7:30 start time, it would go to 10:30. There had been a time where a specific time was placed in the rules and regs. We took that out and just put a number of hours. Now, having said that, there's no magic about that, right? There's still the ability to go past that time. It's the chair has the discretion, reading the room, understanding what you had said, Commissioner Henry, about, people waiting and other things like that, and trying to be customer service friendly, to make a call on that and to project out, what folks are going to do. It also goes to the point where you may get to a point in a conversation or, discussion where you say, okay, we've spent enough time on this. We're going to continue it because there's clearly more that we need to deal with on this, to another meeting, as opposed to just trying to grind it out till 1:30 in the morning. That might be another option. Again, that's going to be up to the chair. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Our work plan is I mean, we've set these times, right? So that we don't usually change them mid-year.
3 hours?
Zero?
You sure
One
do.
and a half times zero is still zero.
The answer is they can't, but they wouldn't change for that.
Oh, I owe you even more. Yeah, that kind of a thing.
Seeing no other business from the public, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Legal training?